Hey guys, it's Stunner once again from HG Central here to narrate another one for you guys here. In this video we will be discussing everything that was known to be removed, changed, or planned to be in perhaps one of the most recognizable racing games of all time, Need for Speed Underground. Underground saw a dramatic departure from the exotic car police chasing on larger-than-life tracks as seen in the earlier Need for Speed titles, instead focusing more on the nighttime underground street racing scene, which was hugely popular at the time, particularly with its huge lineup of everyday cars and tuners. To date, this is what most people would look at and view the franchise at its best. This change of style was a huge impact on the game's development, but in many ways would end up paying off for the team. The game went on to sell over 10 million units, becoming one of 2003's best-selling games, and was also a success both by gaming critics and financially for Electronic Arts. Today we're going to be digging deeper into Underground's development, discussing the stuff that was either removed or changed from the final product. As we don't want to scatter the information anywhere in this video, we'll be organizing it into separate categories. First we'll have the development, where we'll be discussing the development cycle that went towards Underground. After that, we'll be taking a look at the removed features that were taken away from the final game. Then we'll be discussing any stuff involving early cars, car-related stuff, and then shifting over to the environment, city, visuals, etc. Then going over to the UI and menus, the game's sound, and finally just some other miscellaneous stuff that we couldn't fit into its own category. Just before we begin, however, I want to thank Koenigsegg for his knowledge on the game's code. He is the creator of the Underground Free Roam mod, which is definitely worth taking a look at, both the mod itself and his other work. He helped super type one out with a lot of the map-related stuff within the game. Another thanks go out to Burnsy from NFS Series for finding tons of hidden content buried underneath the PlayStation 2 demo of Need for Speed Underground. So with that all out of the way, do enjoy this video.
Excuse me, is there a bank around here?
The year was 2002. At the time, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 was released for the Xbox, PlayStation 2, GameCube, and PC. Hot Pursuit 2's development was split between two different studios, Black Box Games and EA Seattle. Black Box Games were a smaller upstart studio, whereas EA Seattle had previous experience working on PC ports for Need for Speed 2, 3, and 4. EA Seattle would develop the Xbox, GameCube, and PC versions, whilst Black Box would just focus on developing the PlayStation 2 version. Despite this, however, the games, though based around the same core game, weren't entirely the same on how they played. Black Box's PS2 version was released to critical acclaim, but EA Seattle's versions, though receiving praise, did not reach the same amount of acclaim as Black Box's game, or the success. Eventually, EA, who were largely impressed with Black Box's excellent work on the PlayStation 2 version, decided to take the studio to work with them, renaming their company as simply EA Black Box, whilst EA Seattle would close their doors shortly later in 2002. EA decided to let Black Box develop the next Need for Speed title, this time for all the major platforms and not just the PlayStation 2 version. The game? Need for Speed Underground. Black Box were persistent about having a change of style for the series, and instead of the fast yet expensive Lamborghinis and Ferraris dominated game, decided to move over to the import tuner scene with the big exhausts, neons, and subwoofers. And this had a large following around the time of the game, heavily thanks to the popularity of the Fast and the Furious movie series, which had launched in 2001. They decided to make the NFS series go underground. In April of 2003, EA announced Need for Speed Underground to the public for the first time. It was promised to feature extensive customization and around 20 cars from manufacturers such as Mitsubishi, Toyota, and Subaru. The game was also announced to appear at E3, which would remain true. An early build of the game was playable at E3. When analyzing the E3 footage, we can see that many of the UI elements were quite different, including the track selection screen, which features the outline of a woman, most likely one of the characters from the game. The shaking effects in a drag race are considerably more extreme, and the HUD even blurs out. I can only presume the shaking was reduced to try to avoid gamers suffering from motion sickness. For some reason, though I am not entirely sure if this was removed or not, but you can notice smoke effects here. I never noticed this personally in the final game, so there's a chance it might have been a removed effect. Also, it looks as if someone has been messing with the debug menu, as screen print, which shows debug info, is seen here. It also looks like this person had access to Debug World Camera. Someone might have found the debug menu by mistake. This usually does not occur in an E3 build. The E3 periods even had a trailer, which was just the original intro, but with Fabulous's song Youngin' Holla Back in the background. This song was eventually removed from the final game, however. At the end, it also shows an early Underground logo, which was in use until around the time of the PlayStation 2 demo, it seems, as it is also in another trailer. The E3 appearance also had an interview with one of the game's developers, Chuck Oseja. In the interview, he explained the game's change of direction and style from the series before, and many of Underground's features. The footage shows a different version, however, which is clearly noticeable due to the lack of blur and color effects and the reflections on the road. For some reason, however, the license plates seem to be missing, likely meaning it was something later added into the game. Black Box's hardest task with Underground was delivering the sense of speed and part swapping that would be found within the game's final product. Underground was released on the 17th of November in North America, the 21st in Europe, and on the 25th of December in Japan, to positive reviews. It would go on to sell over 15 million copies, ranking it as the second best-selling Need for Speed game of all time, only behind 2005's Most Wanted. According to in-game files, there was at some point going to be a mode called Smoke Show, presumably being a mode where you were showing off your car by perhaps doing burnouts or just building as much smoke as possible. It was likely removed as it wouldn't have served much purpose within the final game. It was removed later in development, it seems, as quick race entries and some asset leftovers of this mode still exist. Another game mode entry called Party was removed. There's a chance that it could have been a large local multiplayer mode similar to what would have been seen in the likes of Burnout 3 and Burnout Paradise. Another removed game mode is Car Show, which seems, well, rather self-explanatory to say the least. A very interesting scrapped mode is Cash Knockout. What makes this mode interesting is that this mode was also removed from later Black Box Need for Speed games, and can be playable in the Most Wanted PlayStation 2 demo through the use of reverse engineering. The mode's premise was to collect as much cash as possible before a time limit expires. However, perhaps the most interesting of all of these is the Tournament Game mode, which is actually still accessible through the use of Cheat Engine on the final PC version game, and is in fully functional form. It also appears in the demo through reverse engineering, but as to be expected, it does not function as well as it does in the final version. This mode was discovered by Speedy Heart, which you can watch her discovery of this by clicking on the now on-screen video. Originally, it was also possible to race on regular tracks during the drift and drag modes instead of the custom drift and drag tracks, as one of these races in the PlayStation 2 demo takes place in Market Street. Notice the drift HUD too during this. Characters seem to originally play a bigger role in the game, as these pre-race taunts would have indicated.
So come on, everybody rock. So come on, everybody rock. So come on, everybody rock. So come on, everybody rock.
According to this text, upgrades were required to get more style points. Apparently, instant replays was also supposed to be a feature in Underground, but would eventually be removed from the game. They were added back in Underground 2, however instant replays would again be removed in future titles, not being seen again until 2009's Shift. A sort of feedback on your driving and race position was removed from the game as well. Lastly, there seems to be hints that Police, a feature which would play heavy importance only a couple years later, was cut from the game or was meant to be implemented but never made it. It's possible police cars were cut because the cop cars wouldn't have been able to mix well with the driving mechanics and AI balancing, plus many of the game's tracks being rather narrow. Time to document the most important thing in the game, the cars. First of all, let's take a look at some of the playable cars that were removed from the game. Thanks to the help of Need for Speed modder Koenigsegg, we're able to take a look at the car list as shown in the PlayStation 2 demo of the game. This list is primarily full of leftovers from Black Box's previous title, Hot Pursuit 2, but there's a good indication to determine which cars are in fact leftovers. In the files, two different car names exist. One is the normal car name, like what's being shown here, and the other carries the line HP at the end, which we of course can determine that it stands for Hot Pursuit. If the car's name contains this line, we can confirm that it's merely just a Hot Pursuit 2 leftover. Starting off, perhaps, the most interesting of removed cars is the Mini Cooper. This would have been quite the addition if the car was to remain in the final game. Perhaps coincidentally, this same car was also removed from another racing game just a couple years later, from Rockstar San Diego's Midnight Club 3, which is a story for another day. Though it's not clear as to which version was removed, it likely was to have been based off of the R50 platform Mini that had launched in late 2000. Interestingly, the BMW M5 also appears to be a removed car from the game, as the car name lacks the HP line in it. Though it was a car from Hot Pursuit 2, questions can be raised if it was actually intended to see a release in Underground or whatnot. Of also interesting note is that the BMW Z8, which was another car from Hot Pursuit 2, also lacks the HP line. Let's head over to the traffic cars now. First of all, a red variant of the traffic van can be seen in the PlayStation 2 demo. There is no red variant seen in the final game. Also in the demo, an unused car simply titled 4DR_Sedan02 internally is seen in the gameplay, but not in the final game. It remains in the final files, but goes unused, and can be brought back into the game by simple modding. A bus model also remains in the files of Underground and Underground 2, but is also unused, but can be restored. Same story for an ambulance that is again unused in both Underground games, but also can be restored. And there's also a fire truck. Guess which two games it both went unused in, and can be restored in. Eddie's car went through a few changes as seen here. His skyline was originally yellow rather than orange, and instead of East Riders written on the side of his car, Grifter was written. This could, and most likely, means that the East Riders were originally at one point going to be called the Grifters. In the intro, you can also see a different version of his car with an Underground logo on his window, as well as yellow-colored rims. In the box art, the car also had some orange rims, and notice here how the East Riders logo is just an Underground logo instead. You could add up that this is just a logo that was there for the cover, but still. The Integra Type R that you drive at the beginning also had golden rims, as shown in the intro. Several vinyls from the beta that were removed from the final game, as shown here. The Focus originally had a dual exhaust bumper, which was removed. The Mitsubishi Eclipse also had a few removed bumpers that made the car dual exhaust. The Focus also had a front bumper, which is featured in the final version. However, it had some slight differences in the earlier versions, as you can see. The lights are either not textured or never were meant to be on the bumper. Notice that the manufacturer logo is still here, even though every manufacturer logo disappears on almost every non-stock bumper in the final game. The stock engine upgraded also had an exposed engine feature, but it doesn't show the stock engine in the final version. The Supernova spoiler at one point, it used to be a carbon spoiler. Car manufacturer logos differed from their final counterpart as well. In this category here, we'll be discussing the changes made to Olympic City, the visuals, and more miscellaneous stuff related to the subject matter. Before we begin, I'll show most, if not all map-related content that had been discovered with the recent Debug World camera mod, found by Need for Speed modders Speedy Heart and Xanvier, so thanks to both of them for their hard work. This camera works on the PC, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 2 demo of most Need for Speed Black Box games. If you want to check out this camera for yourself, a link to it has been put in the description of this video. Unfortunately, without any modification to the game, it's impossible to drive outside of the game's barriers. But again, thanks to the work of a fellow Need for Speed modder, Koenigzeg in this case, we now have the chance to drive outside the barriers thanks to his free roam mod. Now let's get into the environment changes. Koenigzeg did a lot of exploring in the Need for Speed Underground map, and in a collaboration with 379 Philippe, made a map that shows off all of the game's districts. Every road has a colored area which belongs to a certain district. L.A. Cooper also made a rather impressive looking map of Olympic City, showing off all the drivable areas within the game. While this doesn't necessarily have much to do with the beta version of this game, it's still an interesting thing to note nonetheless. I also want to point out that at one point it was speculated that the river was originally going to be a highway of some sorts, but was changed into, well, the river. Let's get into the PlayStation 2 demo of this game, which is probably the earliest build of Underground that we'll be able to get at. I'll show comparisons between the PlayStation 2 demo map and the final. Before we start, you'll notice a lot of these weird colorful textures. The reason is that the PlayStation 2 demo doesn't bother to load these out-of-map textures. They do exist, however they just simply will never load, so instead of a textureless model, these textures will appear instead. Let's start off with some differences in the Market District. As you can see here, a few palm trees were cut, less buildings, and smaller prop differences are also here. Notice the billboard as well. This area looks extremely unfinished in the demo, and I sincerely doubt it was even designed in mind for the demo. Also, you can notice the hospital has been replaced with a parking garage. Just some small minor billboard changes here. Some different buildings in the background. Every skate ramp and prop is covered with graffiti. The placement of some ramps are also different. The large Chinese-styled enter prop is considerably different and more lively in the final, with lights in it being a bit bigger. Same goes for the similar-looking prop on the right side of the road. There's also a billboard missing on the right. Missing road signs and a different building texture in the background. This train station sign is missing in action. The fountain effect is rather interesting, as it looks a lot better in the demo rather than in the final game. The demo also is missing the red turn signs, as well as a missing billboard. The demo also lacks the light ray effect on the tall lampposts. The effect is used, however, but only for some smaller lampposts, such as those in the skating park. The building here isn't illuminated with neon, unlike in the final game. Light is not illuminating the Chinese-styled prop here. No particular changes, but Chinatown looks a lot more lively and colorful in the demo compared to the final game. There's a missing building along with a billboard on the right. The factory pipes on the right also look a lot taller in the final. Whilst the height of the bridge was equal in the final game, during the demo the heights were actually different, which was the likely reason there was no reverse variant of the Market Street track in builds before and around the PlayStation 2 demo, as you'd be unable to jump over the bridges due to the height difference. The smashable barriers did not exist yet at this point. Different colored props on the left and different colored factory props on the right. Here you can see that they were originally gray, which changed to green by the time of the final game. The gas sign here is different. The bowling building had more neon than what it would have had in the final game. The graffiti textures on the wall was different than what would end up being used by the game's release, along with the background buildings. The construction building here also lacks any illumination. One thing that was actually toned down from the demo to the final game was the vegetation as seen here. This entire bridge is absolutely absent from the demo, along with the big stone walls. Buildings and billboards here were quite different. The red turning sign is missing along with the lamppost in the background. The texture for it is a rather strange cartoonish green instead of the final sand texture. A lot of stuff is missing in the demo, which I'm sure by this point you were probably expecting, including the huge airport in building. The two billboards are different here. The white tall lampposts and barriers are also absent. Stoplights and a few other props are not to be found here. Also, the closed off road that you may remember from the final game is actually open in the demo. This entire road, though, is closed off for construction in the demo version. The parking garage had a different color, and the green poster here was actually removed from the final game. The background building is different as well. A lot of stuff here isn't present in the demo. The light illuminating the statue here is also absent. I also found this removed underground billboard in the demo. Can't be sure, of course, but it's possible that this at one time may have been an early logo for the game. The clock tower, billboard, and AMSO tower are all missing in the demo, as well as less vegetation. An extremely unfinished and early version of the parking garage shortcut. There's no building on the garage, and there's also a big building outside the barriers which is not in the final game. It was simply replaced by some construction work. The tube object that connects these two buildings here are taken out in the final release. This shortcut would see quite the alteration in the final game, but it's arguable that it was actually rather more interesting here. The sign also looks different here, and several props are missing in action. The highway sign and props to go with it are also missing. In earlier builds as well as the demo, these barriers are yellow. Some very early work even shows that they were once blue. In very early screenshots, it was shown that roads were also going to be barriers, and get this, fire was behind them. As it's nowhere to be seen in the demo, this was removed rather early on. Here also is a render of an early version of Chinatown, presumably the one that was in use from the intro, which was found by V6 Steam Engine on the Need for Speed Theory's forum boards. In the game's files, two different tracks were discovered which go unused throughout any point of the game. The first, understandably, was never meant to be used by gamers, as it was merely a test track found by 379 Felipe. The map was used to test out various aspects of the game's racing mechanics, but was mainly in use for in-game effects and physics. The second is a track that was only recently found and restored by the talented and earlier mentioned Koenigsegg. Thanks to him for his hard work on discovering and restoring this track. The track in question was given the simple name Tech Park, and is a sprint race that takes place within the downtown district. I made a video showing this track off, which you can watch by clicking the on-screen video now. Those were all the known map differences, but just before we end off with this segment, let's get into some visual differences. As seen in early videos and screenshots, the use of nitrous would cause the heads-up display to fade away during drag races. The shaking effects were considerably more extreme in earlier builds, plus the demo. As you can see in these screenshots, the road reflections actually looked amazingly better than what was seen in the final. This effect was downgraded a bit, but still noticeable in the PlayStation 2 demo. My only guess as to why it may have been downgraded due to either frame rate issues, or it was just rather glitchy.
Brooklyn. Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Holla back, back.
Now for the game's user interface and menus. Most of these changes are of course from the demo itself. Normally the PlayStation 2 demo has a simple launch up such as seen here. However, this can easily be overwritten by modding the executable or memory, which grants access to the entire main menu. Or at least one of the menu that works. First thing you'll notice is that the backgrounds here are different. The start menu is largely the same, albeit with a different logo. The background is very different here, where instead of a moving car driving down an endless tunnel, it's a bumper cam of Chinatown. V6 Steam Engine from the Need for Speed Theories forums did manage to capture something rather interesting in this background video. Yes, that's a truck. This truck has never been seen in any screenshots or early gameplay videos, so it either was cut very early on in development, or was rather just intended for the background video, which personally seems rather unlikely, as you probably wouldn't have noticed it without having to slow down or stop the video frame by frame. Here's some early menu icons from the demo.
Top off flow, though you must feel like I'm on the ground. Only ride the brakes around a sexy woman. Cause other than that, I'm gunning, trying to touch 200. I'm in the wind, hell flying like a. I sit by you, so you only get a glimpse. What all them 100 hearts, what I'm supposed to do. But all this power I'm supposed to do. Dive dirty, cut you off if you let me. With money on the sucker, you ain't supposed to get.
These setting screens look nothing like any other menu in the game. There's a chance this could have been a design in mind for the menus of Underground early on. This here is apparently some sort of early track selection screen. It admittedly actually looks better here than what was eventually used in the final game. Thanks to 379 Philippe for finding this screen. Speaking about the track selection screen, these here have that same atmosphere seen from the early backgrounds, also containing the icon of the girl in it that was seen in the E3 footage. When launching up Underground mode in the demo, selecting the new option presents you with this video, internally named carsol.mpc. Afterwards, you'll be able to buy a car, which in this demo is the Ford Focus. Upon getting your car and choosing to start a race, you're placed into the Market Street race as seen in the demo. If you, however, select the load option, you'll be put into this screen, which lets you view rather interesting stuff. Here's the race selection screen, which contains over 150 events. Unfortunately, either most of these simply don't work, or just put you into the same Market Street track. The theater option was entirely removed, but do remain in the form of leftovers in the final PC version. Of interesting note, the PC leftover icons differ from those as seen in the demo here, suggesting the theater option was potentially removed very late into the game's development. The early magazine screen. One last interesting thing to mention is that in the extras option on the main menu, you can see menu entries for a demo and a trailer for a game called Supercar GT. This wasn't just a placeholder name, this was actually supposed to be a racing game that got cancelled very early in development. The only amount of information that could be found is a small announcement page on IGN and other minor info. If enough interest shows, I might do an in-depth video on this cancelled game on my second channel, Supertype 1, a channel that focuses and documents game development, and, yes of course, cancelled games. Not much else to really mention here, but before we end here, I do want to show some menus that were found by Philippe. You can watch my and Philippe's video on the Underground 1 menu by clicking on the on-screen video or the description after you're done watching the video. Some of the game's sounds were either different or removed altogether. Let's take a look at what changed. First, the UI/clicking sounds were a lot different from their final counterpart. The engine and gear sounds were different, and all the cars by the time of this build seemed to use the same sounds. This could have just been meant to be used as a placeholder for the time being. Fabulous's song Youngin' Hollaback was removed from the game. The song was heavily advertised in the game as it was used in multiple trailers, the intro at one point, and the demo, along with a lot of preview discs that were sent out to game journalists at the time. It seemingly was cut also extremely late into development as it was used in journalist material from only 2 months before release. It's unknown as to why the song was cut, especially since it was so heavily marketed in the game. I have a belief that it may have been a contractual issue for the song, but who really knows for sure. Finally, we finish up with in-depth stuff that we couldn't really fit into a certain category, or essentially miscellaneous. The HUD went through many changes during development. Quite early on, the HUD had a Hot Pursuit 2-like style, using Impact as the game's main font. This font was retained in the arcade version of Underground, however. The color of the HUD elements was a darker shade of blue rather than the lighter shade used in the final build. Also, the mini-map? Here it's just a straight line showing where the other races are and doesn't show any surroundings. Notice the water splash effect as well, along with the background buildings and the haunting default texture as well on the left. Lampposts also have some rather strange kind of posters on them, one that I don't recall seeing in the final game. Again, the HUD. It's now turned into a lighter shade of blue, but some elements are using a different font. Also, the minimap road is dark blue and lacks any surroundings around it. Here are some early barriers that were found in a preview playthrough video of Underground. They look like the Nissan logo, but with red neon. The flag girls in the earlier versions looked notably different, and I'll leave it to you whether they look creepy or not. The finish/start line was just a red stripe instead of the flags. Bank, money, was referred to as credits earlier in the game's development. Here are some early and removed track names found by Koenigsegg. The intro also went through some changes. The first version of the intro used the already aforementioned Youngin' song. There are more scenes featuring the girl driving the Eclipse. At the end of it features a very early logo used until shortly after E3. The second version of the intro uses the song Super Moves by Overseer. The final intro still briefly uses the song at the beginning, though sped up to keep the same pitch for the song that would eventually be used as the final intro, Kimosabe by Beat T. Here are also some screenshots of some in-development cutscenes. And lastly, it also seems possible that Underground was going to miss the 2003 deadline, perhaps not even being released until the following year in 2004. Who knows what would have changed had the game been given more development time to allow this to happen. So, that was all the known removes content from Underground. I've been Thunder of HG Central, voicing this video throughout. Feel free to check out my channel if you enjoy watching LPs of car games, showcasing car mods, or just general nonsense of the usual internet kind. I also want to give a special thanks out to Koenigsegg for helping out with a lot of the PlayStation 2 file related stuff, as well as many of the track related stuff. Burns East, Shirno Toho, I gave that name an attempt, for his knowledge and research on the demo. V6 Steam Engine for his research. Speedy Heart for her contribution to the Debug World camera. Xanvier, or Xan1242, also for the Debug World camera. And a thanks to 379 Philippe for finding hidden menus in the game's test track. This video took days and weeks of research and time to write. I hope you guys did enjoy it. My next video will focus on the sequel, Underground 2. A video for Most Wanted will follow suit later on. As for Carbon, that may have to be delayed for some point later on in the future, as new information and content continues to be found for the game to this day. I'm also planning work on a video for Supercar GT, the cancelled game mentioned earlier in the video, along with a video on Split Second 2, planned to be voiced by a personal friend of mine, GTR Drifter, all on my second channel, Super Type 1. By the way, if you're good at working with scripts and have a reasonably decent microphone, I'm always interested in looking for more narrators to add some variety. So if you would like to voice over some of my future videos, then be sure to comment down below or send a PM to my channel here. These Need for Speed videos are currently being planned to continue being narrated by Thunder here, just to keep with the flow of the series. I do plan to continue working on the history of Burnout after I've finished up with this series, as making this took quite a lot of work, and multitasking on more than one project is just something I'm not capable of doing. Lastly, just a question for my viewers, would you like to see more narrated videos even for the smaller, more minor videos? Or do you prefer the current format of using text throughout the video? Comment below whether you prefer narration or not. Anyways, thank you guys so much for making it to the end. If you found this video interesting, please leave some support by perhaps giving this video a like, comment, and be sure to subscribe and click on the bell icon so you can be notified whenever I make a new video, or to watch some of my other videos. Thanks once again, and I'll see you next time.